Before we get into the video, I need you guys to do me a favour. Number 1, like the video. Also comment, let me know your thoughts on the case. Now Liverpool's Lance Kennedy's life could have been a script drafted by Christopher Nolan and played in every cinema and film festival in the Western world. Now Lance was a drug kingpin who masterminded an international drug transportation ring to the tune of £350 million. He did it all the while being out of the UK just by using a mobile phone, and his methods of transporting the gear was by boat and helicopter, cars and trains. Now it was estimated that he was responsible for bringing in at least half a tonne of Class A gear into the country and mostly distributing it to the north of England. 32-year-old Lance Kennedy, who used an address in Birkenhead as a home base, was audacious, brave, cunning and smart. Now growing up in Wirral, he used school friends from St John Pleasington School, trusted contacts such as Paris Newcomb and Matthew Payne, people he could rely on, and created a network that was one of the biggest ever. Now while Lance Kennedy was residing in Spain, the dad of 4 entrusted Encrotrat to give orders and send coordinates as to where the helicopter carrying consignments of kilos of high purity coke would land, mainly the Kent area. The pilot would log legitimate flights and register the trips between Antwerp and also airfields in Kent. Now while travelling the logged course, the pilot would momentarily land at an open airfield, wait for Lance's friends. They would then unload the coke and then the pilot would go back into the air and continue his pre-logged flight routine in order to not rouse suspicion. Now police had no record, but they believed that kingpin Lance Kennedy had used the helicopter to transport coke at least 6 different times. Once Lance's friends had the coke, they would then use websites and also mobile phones to rent out log cabins, cottages and other small dwellings in quaint villages. Now police recorded that in December 2015, one of the helicopters had diverted off its flight before landing in an airfield close to Faversham. Now the helicopter was unaccounted for 8 minutes before it reappeared on the radar and then continued its normal flight routine. And in October 2015, Lance's courier had taken just under £4,000 in cash and paid to rent the Crow Cottage for 6 months. Now, they told the owners that it did not require any sheets changed or even housekeeping. They would take care of it themselves. Now, police were able to establish that Lance's associate, J. Flip-Flop Robinson, was staying in the cottage in order to wait for the Class A gear to land in a nearby airfield so he could then take it up north. Now because Lance was so smart, he looked at the UK and pinpointed where coke was the most profitable. He looked at the average income people had, how much was spent on partying, the nightlife atmosphere, and then he chose the destination for coke, and that would be Teesside, most popular areas being Stockton and Guysborough. Now part of Lance's downfall is that he did not give his men the cash to pay the second instalment of rent for Crow Cottages. When the owners of Crow Cottages contacted J. Robinson and explained either hand over the next instalment of rent or please leave the property, Jay told the owner that he needed to collect his kids' clothes and toys. The owner allowed it, of course. However, when Matthew Payne and J. Robinson went to the property, all they did was retrieve a holder from a cubbyhole. It was so heavy that they could not carry it. They had to drag the 2 bags out of the property, a chalk line marking their movements. And then in April of 2016, Paris Newcomb was told by Lance to book a property in Dover. This was the same time that the police were investigating Lance Kennedy and noticed that a known associate of his, Robert Ferry Stewart, and David Campbell had repeatedly driven the length of England, often returning back home the same day or the next day. So on April 10th, the duo had driven to Teesside from Wirral, reaching Teesside at roughly 4 p.m. The next day, police noticed that Robert Stewart then drove from Teesside to Dover to the new cottage where Lance Kennedy had booked. Now, police say just after 24 hours, Robert drove to Ashford and then back to Wirral, and then the following day, the men drove back to Dover. It was then established that Robert was following the coke and the money, hundreds of thousands of pounds in cash and millions of pounds in drugs. When David Campbell was arrested and it was put to him his movements, he explained that they wanted to travel to Euro Disney but decided against it at the last minute. However, police then pulled out the messages and they read as follows: "Things are changing again, might be tomorrow. something to do with the weather and we need to get a hotel because he's got someone staying at the cottage with Flip-Flop, that of course being Jay Robinson. Later that night, Connor texts his wife, just had a phone call in the cottage. The woman says that she was in Australia, but 1471, the number and the area code is London. It's made Ferry and Flip-Flop really paranoid. Now after Stuart and Campbell returned from Wirral, Connor texts Alison to say stuff's coming in at 12:15 tomorrow. The morning Stuart and Campbell began the long drive back to the south coast. Now Alison was one of the couriers. Police were able to gather vital evidence when EncroTrap phone was confiscated and the known users in Stockton had given up names of Lance's associates. Their investigation conducted by Cleveland police was called Operation Spoon Bill, and in September 2016 police were given the name Alison Fraser Clark, who was 23 years old, and Connor Fraser Clark, and they were couriers. They were also husband and wife. Now police surveyed the movements of the man and woman driving to Newcastle and then stopped the pair on the A19. Now the car was stopped and searched and police noticed that the car had secret compartments, and in order to carry out that work it cost £20,000. And then police searched an address in Wirral and found 16 kg of pure coke worth £11 million hidden beneath the floorboards and under the bed. The next step was for police to seize Connor and Alison Fraser Clark's phone. Inside they found messages from Lance Kennedy which showed that he was the person who orchestrated the gang's movements and also payments and also the incomings and outgoings of the money, and also mentioned the coke shipments from the helicopters. Now, at the same time, the NCA had arrested one of Lance's pilots too. More raids and stops were conducted to Lance's known gang members. In one search, police found 43 kg of coke, 63 kg of H, and 30 encrypted phones. Now, the gear was worth upwards of £12 million. Everyone who was caught and arrested admitted their guilt straight away concerning transporting and supplying drugs. Now, while Lance Kennedy's criminal organisation was being dismantled and crumbling, Lance was in Thailand. But then Lance made the grave mistake. He travelled to Moldova and then attempted to cross into Ukraine without any valid passport or papers or documentation, with his mate Robbie Stewart, who was already on bail, and he was sentenced in his absence to 3 years. Now, Ukraine police banned the men from the country for 5 years and then sent them back to Moldova, where the UK extradited them back home. Now, when Kennedy arrived into the UK, he was immediately remanded and put into strangeways because police had a real fear that due to Kennedy's authority, his presence, his power, and his wealth, there were people out there that would try to break him out of prison. Now, when Lance Kennedy was put in front of a judge, he was jailed for 18 years because he pled guilty and got a third of the sentence. All Lance Kennedy could do when he stood in front of the judge was ask them to please be merciful. He was then told that if he had not pled guilty, he would have been jailed for 28 years. And of course, Lance Kennedy accepted his sentence. And this guy was one of the most powerful and biggest crime bosses in the drug distribution space that the UK has ever seen when it comes to policing, of course. Stay safe, safe.